You've been a victim of fake news, and it's your fault. Now let me be clear. When I say fake news, I don't mean news that you disagree with. I mean completely false, fabricated news stories. And while you may think you could never fall victim to this, while you could never believe something so fake, I guarantee you that you have. We all have, no matter what political party we subscribe to. Having worked in the news media for over 5 years, I've seen firsthand just how quickly disinformation can spread and how detrimental it is to our society. So why do we fall victim to fake news? That answer you'll see has less to do about algorithms and more to do with our own psychological biases. Hey guys, what is up? I'm Kara, the creator of Round Our World, and welcome back to my channel, your place for video tips, storytelling techniques, and video marketing advice. If you're looking to take your videos to the next level, then you're going to want to subscribe to my channel and tune in for the second part of this fake news video series where I talk about the fault in journalism and the mainstream media in combating fake news. There's an awful lot of misinformation swirling around on the internet. From memes to gossip to conspiracy theories to completely fabricated news stories. And with so much information bombarding us daily, particularly in an election year, it's up to us to decipher what we believe in and what we don't. The internet has made human knowledge instantly accessible, and I hardly think that's a bad thing. When you forget the name of your favorite actor or the name of the museum in a foreign city that you visited, all of that information is right at your fingertips. But that also means that there's a lot of misinformation at your fingertips as well. And if we're not careful with our information consumption strategy, then we will fall susceptible to this misinformation. This is why we have to learn how to filter out all the information that we're exposed to. I understand that normally when you hear the term fake news, you think of completely implausible headlines. And while it's easy to say that you know the difference between real news and fake news, the truth is, it's getting harder and harder to tell. When I say that it's your fault that you've been a victim of fake news, I mean that it's your fault in where you're consuming your information. I mean that it's your fault in what you're engaging in by liking, commenting, and sharing. All three of those things give these fake news stories life. That's how the algorithm works. Just like how a fire needs oxygen, heat, and fuel to burn, fake news needs these three things in order to succeed: tools and services, social media channels, and motivation. And without any of those three things, fake news cannot survive. What I mean by the first requirement of tools and services are things like paid likes or paid followers, anything that helps give that fake news story authority. The second requirement in social media is just really a platform where fake news can spread. And the third requirement is that there needs to be motivation. And by that I mean there needs to be motivation on both sides. Usually from a creator standpoint, monetary benefits from advertisers is motivation enough to keep creating fake news. But from a consumer standpoint, the combination of our distrust in the news media and the need to confirm our own psychological biases is motivation enough to continue to spread misinformation. Fake news is spreading farther and faster today than ever before because more people are relying on social media channels like Facebook and Twitter to be their primary source of news information. Last year, the Science Journal published a study about why fake news spreads farther, faster, and deeper than the truth on social media, and why the effects of that are more pronounced when it comes to political news. What the study found is that the blame has less to do with Russian bots and more to do with ordinary people with meager followings sharing fake news with their friends. So, why do we fall for fake news? Fake news tends to be salacious and emotional, so it's no surprise that it spreads. But the reason why low credibility content can take the place of real news has a lot to do with how the algorithms exploit these three psychological biases. The first bias is the implicit bias. As human beings, we have a tendency to group ourselves into categories, and we're more inclined to trust the people that are in our groups than those outside. The implicit bias is unconscious. It fulfills one of our most basic human needs, and that is to belong to a group. The algorithm on platforms like Facebook and Twitter only encourage us to separate into these groups by mostly showing us posts from the people that we interact with the most. This creates the echo chamber that we all know social media to be. For example, if you're always liking and engaging with content and headlines from a particular news site, then the Facebook algorithm is going to show you more content, more headlines from that particular news source because they want you to like it. There's money in you clicking it. This creates filter bubbles, and that isolates us from different perspectives. And these echo chambers that we're creating, that the algorithm's creating, is ripe for manipulation and misinformation because we're always seeking to confirm our biases. The second bias that algorithm strengthens is confirmation bias. This refers to the tendency to seek out information that would confirm what we already know to be true. This means that we're more likely to believe facts that conform to our beliefs and more likely to turn a blind eye to facts that contradict what we believe. So how confirmation bias works exactly is as soon as we're exposed to any type of information, we immediately try to decide whether we believe it or not. And generally, if it's consistent to what we already think, we believe it automatically. And therefore, we're more likely to share it with our friends on social media. But if this information is contrary to what we already believe, we tend to dismiss it because it would cause too much cognitive stress and our brain is constantly trying to protect us from any type of stress. So while confirming our biases can be good for distinguishing between fact and fiction, it also demonstrates a lack of critical thinking. It makes us vulnerable to fake news. Because of our implicit bias, we're more likely to believe the misinformation that our group spreads and think that the misinformation that the other group spreads is completely ridiculous.
Someday you're going to have to explain, why did you get 3.5? I never got any money from Russia. I don't get money from Russia.
The foreign countries are paying you a lot. Russia's paying you a lot. China's paying you a lot.
This results in complete polarization, which is exactly what the American political system is going through right now. While all of us are living in these social media echo chambers, confirming information within our own groups, this just reverberates and mutes everything else. The algorithms of these platforms are designed to strengthen our confirmation bias because they're only showing us the most relevant content, the most engaging content for us. This means that a disinformation campaign can exploit confirmation bias by tailoring messages to an individual user more likely to engage with fake news because they've engaged with a fake news article in the past. In 2016, studies found that the top 20 fake news stories were shared 1.7 million times more than the top 20 real news stories. This means that misinformation is more prevalent than facts. And the more we crowd out factual information, the more we will fall for fake news. This is because the more often we see a headline, the more likely we are to believe it. And if fake news is crowding out real news, the more we're going to be exposed to fake news. This brings us to the third bias, the illusory truth effect, which says that each time we're exposed to the same story, this makes a subtle impression, and each time the story grows more familiar, therefore casting more of an illusion of truth. The more often we hear something repeated, the more likely we are to believe it. The same goes for fake news. The more often we read the same ridiculous or implausible headline, the more likely we are to eventually believe it's true. Since all of these algorithms favor information that have been shared and engaged with the most, fake news tends to be salacious and play off of our emotions. As I've already discussed, social media doesn't share a wide range of different perspectives. It tends to share the most popular content. And the more popular we see information being, the more credibility we give that information. And the more likely we are to believe it because we want to believe that we're in the majority. This confirms our previous two biases of the implicit bias and the confirmation bias. So, when I say that fake news is your fault, I mean it's all of our faults, due to some very, very deep cognitive biases that we all have that these social media platform algorithms like Facebook and Twitter only strengthen. Unfortunately, the solution is not so clear-cut, because social media is becoming more and more a part of our daily lives, and we don't control the algorithms. And while Facebook and Twitter are doing what they can to stop the spread of fake news, it's not enough. So, how do you stop from becoming a victim of fake news? Be aware of your cognitive biases and use critical thinking and fact-checking for every source and every information. This means that you have to have some trust in the mainstream media while holding us accountable. Make sure you catch Friday's video because I'm going to tackle the issue of journalism in the era of fake news. Fake news is both our fault and the mainstream media's fault. And as consumers of fake news, it's important to know all the aspects so we can eradicate fake news once and for all. So tell me in the comments below what you think can be done about fake news. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the second part of this video. Thanks for watching.